Assassin's Creed Revelations was released back on the 15th of November 2011, and even though it's not considered a top tier Assassin's Creed game, it is the conclusion of the most notorious assassin, being Ezio. And recently, I decided to replay this again. In previous videos, I went through Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and it only made sense that I would also go through Revelations to complete the trilogy. And today I'm answering the question of whether or not it's worth going back to play through. But the first thing worth mentioning is Assassin's Creed Revelations never actually intended to exist. Ubisoft never planned to do anything with the Ezio story. They was going to leave it with Brotherhood, but Ubisoft noticed that all of a sudden there was an increase in the popularity with handheld consoles, this being the PSP as well as the Nintendo. The Nintendo was exploding. And that's when Ubisoft started development for a new game. Not Assassin's Creed Revelations, but instead it was known as Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy, and was going to be an exclusive release for Nintendo 3DS. Reason for this, and they would have loved to push it to multiple platforms, so Nintendo 3DS as well as Xbox and PlayStation, with it also later coming on PC. But unfortunately, because of the different platforms that they were looking at, there was a massive difference in the hardware available, meaning that the game is going to look completely different on everything. So with the popularity of Nintendo 3DS, that's what they started to focus on. But later, this ended up being a cancelled game. But with everything that was put in development for Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy, later Ubisoft decided that let's not go and put this to a waste, let's go and reuse everything and put together Assassin's Creed Revelations. Now, when this was first advertised, I was very excited as a kid. I remember getting a magazine and constantly looking at the 2 pages which were available to highlight Assassin's Creed Revelations. But unfortunately, when it was released, it just didn't live up to my expectation. Maybe I was overthinking it for months and months and months before it was finally pushed public. But even going back to it now, it still isn't the best Assassin's Creed. In fact, it feels kinda dry. And speaking of dry, let's actually go into today's video sponsor. Whilst I'm gaming, I always use some type of gamer energy drink supplement. But unfortunately for the ones that I have used in the past, there's always this dry, chalky texture. It just doesn't mix in well with water or milk. But that's where Rogue Energy comes in, because they've solved that problem and they've done it in a way where it still tastes delicious. If you don't believe me, well, you're welcome to take a free sample for yourself. There is a link in the description down below, and over there you can try out a free sample. Give it a test. And if you find out that you enjoy it just as much as I do, you can always use the code GTG to get 10% off every purchase. Link to Rogue Energy is in the description down below. Now, with Rogue Energy beside me, I was able to push through Revelations, and I'm glad that I did. I don't consider this one of the best Assassin's Creed titles, but it is a okay story which ends nicely for Ezio and Altair. In fact, it ends amazing for Altair. With Assassin's Creed, and most people call it Assassin's Creed 1 nowadays, but with the Altair story, it ended somewhat abruptly. The ending was amazing, it was a great boss battle, but after that, you don't really find out what happens. And Ubisoft knew this. There was questions raised all the way through Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, especially considering that there was links back to Altair with the likes of the Altair armor. And we're lucky that Ubisoft did finally decide to push Assassin's Creed Revelations rather than Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy, because it did put an end to the story. But not just Altair's, also Ezio's. There are some bits which are a bit weird, such as the present day missions with Desmond, which aren't really present day missions, they're just coma missions. Desmond is in a coma state after the events of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and also, spoiler alert, so you've actually got time to click off this, but this is also a story which is over a decade old, but after killing Lucy, he fell into a coma state. They stabilized him by putting him back into the Animus, and that's why we're playing through as Ezio once more. And that side of things is pretty weird. It's also very boring as you're in this open space talking to Subject 16. In terms of gameplay, there were some pretty good moments. It feels weird going through Brotherhood because I thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay there, to then go into Assassin's Creed Revelations. There are a lot of changes, and some of the normal inputs that you would expect within Brotherhood have completely changed within Revelations. but with that said, they did add some good mechanics. I really enjoyed using the hook blade. It made parkour a lot faster, much smoother, being able to run, jump, hook blade, pull yourself up, and then pull yourself up again. Despite Ezio being an old man, he seems to be able to scale buildings so much quicker. The parachute was also a nice mechanic, and yet again another fact, a lot of people believe that this was a new mechanic added to Revelations, when in actual fact the parachute was available within Brotherhood. It just wasn't included with any of the main missions, so many people didn't realize that this was an extra item that you can buy into. But with Revelations, it did play a much bigger part. Ubisoft also made some amazing decisions with some of the mission design. One of the best missions is called Set in Sail. This is where Ezio intends to leave the harbor, but unfortunately there is a massive chain in the way. That's when you use a bomb to blow up the chain, but it also ends up exploding everything else around it, also taking down the harbor itself, where you also stumble across a flamethrower whilst you're trying to escape, and then set every ship on fire. It was actually used as part of advertising Assassin's Creed Revelations before it was initially released. Another lot of good missions that Ubisoft added were the different types of parkour missions that you would use to go and find the assassin keys. Now these missions are not anything new, they were included as part of Assassin's Creed 2 as Assassin Tombs, and within Brotherhood they were the Layers of Romulus, but within those games they were side activities. You would have one as part of the main missions to give you an introduction, and the rest had to be completed in your spare time as side missions. But with Revelations, they included them within the main story itself, and they were just as good. But with every time that there was a good mission, there was also some bad missions. There was lots of missions where you would have to tell, and of course we cannot forget the assassin dens. They would at some point be attacked, and you need to do this tower defense minigame. Whilst we're on the subject of talking about missions, we should also talk about the story. And the story is quite simple. It's Ezio exploring more of Altair's final moments, and with that, because Ezio is a 40-50-year-old man at this point, you get to know the final conclusion to the Ezio story, plus also you find out what happened with Altair, and does answer many questions that players had. But alongside this, you're going to meet a lot of characters, and to be honest, none of them are memorable. Ezio and Altair are a given, they are amazing, even at their final stages. But with everyone else, they're just not that special. We have to remember that this comes off the back of some amazing characters that you met through Assassin's Creed 2 and also Brotherhood. And this also somewhat aligns with what we were saying earlier about meeting Subject 16. That doesn't mean that they were awful characters, it just means that there was no depth to them. There was nothing memorable and they did nothing special. Moving away from the story itself, let's actually talk a bit about the setting. The setting is the city of Constantinople during the Ottoman Empire. And overall, it is a pretty good place. It's nice built up, which means parkour between buildings is pretty cool. And you can also use the hook blade to use the zip lines. It is a bit weird that there is a river going straight through it, split between two harbors. And it's definitely annoying when you are going building to building and then have to swim the rest or find a small boat to sail across or just fast travel. But in all honesty, it's a fairly small thing. In most cases, it's only a beginning or end of a sequence where you would need to cross this. There is actually a point in where you leave the city of Constantinople, and this is where you travel to the underworld. The underworld is actually one of my favorite places, not just within Revelations, but also within the Assassin's Creed series. I've always liked the idea of having an underground city, but it does also lead to some fairly weird points, especially when going through the story missions. There's a point in which Ezio is trying to cause a distraction and thinks it's a good idea to use gunpowder. I even remember thinking this as a kid. Ezio thinks that it's some genius plan, and with the people that he's talking to, I've also forgot their names. I told you these characters were not memorable, but with the person that he's talking to as he outlines his plan, he leaves with some sort of catchphrase before he starts the mission. But it ends up being weird because you end up setting this underworld on fire. And as you're trying to escape a few missions later, after you've also completed your assassination target, you end up realizing that you've probably killed hundreds of people. It's crazy that it didn't count as desynchronization for all the innocents that Ezio killed. but still considered as a hero. Now, with everything that we've spoken about with Revelations, quite simply, it's an okay game, maybe pushing good. I wouldn't say it's amazing. For everything that is good about the game, there's also something annoying or just straight out bad. And in all honesty, I'm not too bothered with this. It is a great ending to the story for both Ezio and Altair, and I think it's worth for game developers to actually test out new mechanics. In hindsight, we can say that the tower defense minigame where you protect your den is awful, but how was they supposed to know that? The tower defense game mode at the time for other games was very popular, and the only way for Ubisoft to test whether or not this is something that players would enjoy or not is actually by implementing it into the game and testing it. And of course, this provided them with feedback, and Ubisoft has not included the tower defense minigame in any other Assassin's Creed. If you've recently started playing Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood, then it is still worth going through Revelations. But I would say that there are some missions to skip. If you've played it before and you still have a save game, then maybe avoid some of those Taylor missions and also those tower defense missions. But definitely make sure that you're playing some of the best missions within the game. Set and Sell, some of the missions where you actually go and find the assassin keys, and of course we can't forget every single Altair mission. There's some Altair missions, especially when he gets to his older age, where you don't really do too much in a gameplay point of view, you're mainly just walking. But narratively speaking, it's still worth it. Now, if you enjoyed this video, recently we also went through Assassin's Creed Brotherhood within 2023. So this is now going through the full trilogy. If you do want to see that, that video is now on screen. Click that and I'll be giving my opinion on Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and sharing whether or not it's worth playing in 2023.